There were a lot of times in Perth, particularly sometimes in Melbourne, I've even seen on film that I didn't remember asking Prabhupada about all the... one case I was trying to understand the 8,400,000 species of life, and I asked Prabhupada, are they those 8 million animal forms and human 400,000 human, are they on this planet, or are they divided by countries? Does it mean the Chinese, the Japanese, the Americans? Something like that. And Prabhupada said, no, you're thinking of this planet, but the Srimad Bhagavatam is speaking of the entire universe, the whole universe.
Prabhupada liked to walk out in the open, and especially here in Melbourne and also Sydney. He liked to go to parks a lot, and we took him to the botanical gardens here in Melbourne, which are quite famous. He thought that actually he made a statement that the botanical garden in Melbourne is better than New York Central Park. So and he very much liked it. And I was quite amazed that when Prabhupada walked through the park, he knew a lot of things that would seem a person in his position perhaps wouldn't bother even speaking about, like what the names of the trees were. And Prabhupada would walk, and he'd say, "This is a such and such tree," and then he said, "Go and have a look." Because in the park, all the trees had little kind of name tags. So he'd send someone over, and then the devotee would come over, and he quote that it was in Latin. They'd have the Latin name there, and he said, "What is that?" And said, "Such and such in Latin." And he said, "But what in English?" And he said, "Yes, just see." So he would walk along like that, and that kind of surprised me. Oh, Prabhupada he knows all these things. He knew about trees. He knew about flowers. He very much appreciated the beauty of the park. Also, I remember another time when we were walking. We were walking. It was early in the morning. I guess it was about 6 o'clock, and Prabhupada saw that Prabhupada saw that even at 6 o'clock there was heavy traffic going into the city, because these gardens were really close to the city. There was heavy traffic going into the city, and Prabhupada said, "What is this traffic?" And someone said, "Oh, they're all going to work, Prabhupada." And Prabhupada said, he stopped and he was silent, and he just said, "They are working so hard." And I could see his eye was a little moist, just the stage before a tear would come. He felt, you could feel that he felt so much compassion for these people, that he was concerned that they were, even early in the morning at 6 o'clock, they were racing and rushing into work. He said they are working so hard. And then another time, I think it was that same morning, he saw that some of the businessmen were driving their cars and then parking them right out at the Botanical Gardens, which was about 3 or 4 kilometres from the city. So he was asking, what are they doing? And someone explained that, Prabhupada, they park their cars here so that they can avoid paying parking fees in the city. And Prabhupada said, "Just see." He said, then he gave a story, he said, "A man can ride in a big carriage, but he can't afford to feed the horses." So everyone laughed, and it was so poignant at that point that here we have, someone driving a big car, big businessman wearing a suit and tie and a briefcase and everything, and then they park the car outside and have to walk 3 or 4 kilometres into the city to go to the office.
And when we cleaned his quarters, we would always change his sheets, and Prabhupada stopped that. He said, "You don't change them every day, you just change when they're dirty." And because they were never dirty, but Prabhupada wanted that. And another thing, he used to have a garland, his fresh garland. He had a picture of Radha and Krishna on his little table. And after he'd come back from his morning class and everything, he'd take off that garland and put it on a picture of Radha and Krishna on his desk. But we weren't allowed to throw it out. And on the wall there was the disciplic succession, Bhaktisiddhanta, Gaurakishore and Bhaktivinoda Thakur. So after the garland had been on the deity picture, we would take it off so that he could put the fresh one on, and then we'd place it on Bhaktisiddhanta's picture, and then the next day we'd move it down to Gaurakishore's picture. We'd be moving them all along, and then down to Bhaktivinoda Thakur's picture, and finally we could take it as prasadam. So Prabhupada was very particular about things like that. So one day I had this Bhaktivinoda Thakur's garland on, which you can imagine in the Bombay sun was quite shriveled, you know. So that day I started to think, oh gee, Prabhupada doesn't really know me, and he knows so many devotees so well, and you know, he hardly knows me, and I was feeling, you know, a little bad that I don't get to do very much for Srila Prabhupada, and I was making his vases, which I did every day, and I used to take them up at 11 o'clock. At that time Prabhupada was always having his massage. So that day, the very day I'd been thinking that, I went upstairs and Prabhupada was in his room. So I stopped in fear, in awe, you know, and then I walked in, I put the vases down and offered obeisances, and I was flustered and I was trying to back out of the room. And Prabhupada, he looked at that old garland and he said, "Where from you got this garland?" And he said, "Here, you take this one." And he reached down and he took the fresh garland from that morning that he just put over the picture of the deities, and he gave it to me. Oh, so I felt so happy, and I realised that Prabhupada, he knows what we need. He knows exactly what we need in spiritual life, and it was just so much encouragement from Srila Prabhupada. Then I felt also foolish that I'd had to think like that, and that Prabhupada had to cater to me. But still, it was very treasured for me, you know, that had happened.
For Prabhupada's second visit to Melbourne, for Prabhupada's second visit to Australia, Prabhupada was coming to Melbourne for the first time. And when Prabhupada arrived at the temple, I do recall Krishna Premi was crying. And she was trying to sing Vande Hum, Sri Guru, on harmonium, and crying at the same time. And it was quite an intense affair. But it was done with great affection and sincerity, and Prabhupada nodded and smiled at Krishna Premi. And I remember Upananda had made a big plate of Simply Wonderfuls, which was the number one delicacy in those days. Somehow or other, Simply Wonderfuls were like the summum bonum of life. Some devotees made their own Simply Wonderfuls on the side. Ajamil was famous. He got Gaurangi, Raghunath's wife, to make him an extra large bead bag, and we weren't sure the reason behind it until one day I discovered that inside Ajamil's bead bag, along with his beads, was a small packet of sunshine powdered milk, a packet of butter, and a packet of icing sugar. So Ajamil sometimes used to sneak out the back and roll his own. So we were very addicted to Simply Wonderfuls, and Upananda had made these Simply Wonderfuls, and he offered a plate to Srila Prabhupada, and Prabhupada, I don't think he took any, but he nodded, and then he made a gesture to distribute the Simply Wonderfuls to everyone. I was very much into rules and regulations. I was very pedantic in those days, and probably the best man for being the temple commander, although I must have offended probably every devotee in Australia. But all I could think of was at the time when the Simply Wonderfuls were coming around, I was thinking, but we just read in the Nectar of Devotion a couple of days ago that we shouldn't eat in front of the deity. So I was thinking maybe this is an offence. But I saw everyone else eat their Simply Wonderfuls, and I was very perplexed. I was thinking perhaps we're all committing a great offence here. But in fact, of course, taking prasadam from Srila Prabhupada is beyond any rules and regulations.
I remember one thing that he said really affected me. He asked Upendra, are you studying my books? And Upendra said, yes, Prabhupada, I read your books every day. And Prabhupada thumped the desk. You read my books, but I said, do you study my books? And Prabhupada was emphatic. He said, you must know the meaning of every word. If you learn a verse, don't just learn the verse, like you must know the meaning of every word. He was very emphatic, like this, study. The difference between studying and reading. So I took a little bit to heart at the time.